Following the events of Fallout 4 and the Fallout TV show, a new story would begin for the Commonwealth when a rising Ex Enclave survivor begins to rebuild and seek to reclaim what the Enclave once had, a presence along the East Coast. The events of this story will bring us back to the locations of 76 and Fallout 4 as a new threat will arise and bring war to the Commonwealth.
Following the defeat at Raven Rock in the capital Wasteland, a soldier of the Enclave fled DC and made his way to another location that was known to the Enclave. This was White Springs in the Appalachia Mountains. Colonel McSuckbutt led a small group of survivors to this forgotten location. This is where he would rebuild the Enclave and plot his revenge he would later seek. After a long 3-month journey, McSuckbutt and his men finally reached the bunker. The group found it operational, with only robots maintaining the bunker with a system named Modus in control. McSuckbutt would use Modus to help begin his rebuild of the Enclave, his Enclave. After learning about how Eckhart became a president before losing the bunker, McSuckbutt would rig the same system Eckhart did, and McSuckbutt would become President McSuckbutt. In the following years, President McSuckbutt would slowly rebuild his forces and begin his plan to secure the Appalachian Mountains. The Enclave would start enlisting from local settlements and start to reclaim lost Enclave positions the White Springs group once had. Through local engagement, the Enclave learns of a vault filled with gold. The vault would give McSuckbutt the wealth he needed to build this large army he was seeking. After securing Vault 79 from the Foundation, McSuckbutt began to use gold to buy weapons and hire soldiers into his ranks. With this, the Enclave grew quickly and began creating encampments around the mountains. One encampment was built near Watoga and would be the staging ground for the takeover of Watoga's robotics factory, give a large number of robots to fill Enclave ranks. With the gold and robotics factory, the Enclave would now have the strength to take over the Appalachian Mountains. McSuckbutt would continue his plan by using robots to further his reach in the Appalachian Mountains while minimizing the use of his logistical manpower that would be needed in future operations. In the year 2287, a lone survivor would wage a war against a scientific group known as the Institute. This war would introduce the Brotherhood of Steal into the Commonwealth led by Elder Maxon, with the lone survivor becoming a general of a militia-style faction known as the Minutemen. The two would become allies and fight a war for the greater of the Commonwealth. This would create the foundation of the United Commonwealth Alliance. During the war, Liberty Prime would be rebuilt by a Brotherhood of Steel scientists named Dr. Lee and a Diamond City scientist named Dr. Yuliana Petrova. With the rebuilding of Liberty Prime, General Nate and Maxon launched their attack on the Institute. The ground attack would be led by Liberty Prime, supported by Vertibird air support and several groups of the Minutemen militia from around the Commonwealth. The battle would prove costly for the Minutemen, as they were not as well equipped or trained as the Brotherhood of Steel forces. But with the forces being combined, they would still smash through Institute counterattacks to stall Liberty Prime. The battle would lead to the CIT ruins, into which the Institute would once again attempt a last-ditch effort of a counter-offensive, but would be thwarted by Elder Maxon linking forces with General Nate at the ruins. The plan to break into the Institute would be complete once Liberty Prime was able to create an entrance to the hidden underground structure, which would lead to the battle inside of the Institute.
Construction eliminated. Ground units initiate directive 739.
During the fighting between the Brotherhood and Institute forces, a deep-range radio transmission was sent to Washington, D.C. to make the Citadel aware Maxon's forces were fighting in a war. A radio transmission that was intercepted by an Enclave listening post near D.C. that McSuckbutt had set up to learn about Brotherhood movements. President McSuckbutt learns of this enemy that the Minutemen and Brotherhood are fighting. He becomes very interested in the Institute, so he sends a group of spies known as X, Y, and Z to the Commonwealth to learn more about the situation on the Commonwealth. Meanwhile, General Nate would have begun his assault on the Institute and begun fighting in the hidden underground city. The combined forces would fight their way to the reactor room of the Institute in plans to use the reactor as a bomb, and after Nate's confrontation with Father, a deal was created to allow Institute citizens to flee the battlefield. A deal that would later play in favor to McSuckbutt and allow him to infiltrate the Commonwealth. Although the decision at the time to allow survivors seemed humane, the main goal of blowing up the underground city would still remain. The battle would rage into the reactor room to where many would fall and end, with Nate placing the reactor charge on the core and timing the explosion. With the defeat of the Institute, the Brotherhood and Minutemen to usher in a new age of peace in the Commonwealth. Little to their knowledge, the spies from the Enclave would be arriving soon, and would begin to uncover a reason McSuckbutt would base his entire invasion on. A few years after the war with the Institute, the Commonwealth would unite several factions under a form of government. The United Commonwealth Alliance would consist of Diamond City, Sanctuary, Goodneighbor, Salem, Vault 81, Starlight Trading Post, the Castle, Far Harbor, Atom Cats, and multiple farms under the Minutemen protection. Elder Maxon would refuse to ever come to the aid of Goodneighbor due to its support of ghouls. During this time, Nate would become to stand in president until one would be elected. He would also become the leader of the split Brotherhood faction left behind to help the Alliance by Maxon, known as the Boston Chapter. Maxon would leave back to the capital as he felt the Brotherhood's obligations were filled by aligning the Commonwealth. He would replace the Pridwin with another airship to serve under Sentinel Nate, while Paladin Brandis would also stay behind to help serve the Commonwealth. The Minutemen would become the main military force in the Commonwealth, with three types of armed forces. Minutemen serving locally like a National Guard. The United Commonwealth Alliance Armed Forces, a basic deployed fighting force, and then the Minutemen, Special Airborne Division. McSuckbutt would find out the type of technology that the Institute had and would begin a military build-up to invade into the Commonwealth to recover the tech that was still spread around the Commonwealth. The spies in the Commonwealth would report the news of the creation of the United Commonwealth Alliance to McSuckbutt. McSuckbutt would then order the spies to begin gathering target information on the Alliance's military infrastructure, and for them to each infiltrate a settlement, for when the time came they could take it from within. Years later, after the Enclave returned to the Appalachian Mountains, their rise to power was almost complete. The next objective they faced was the location that could house the vertebrate fleet that had been created and the power needed to mass produce the material needed for war. This would lead President McSuckbutt to personally lead a battle for Wade Airport to try and reclaim the airport for super mutants. super mutants that were created by a FEV virus that Urquhart released on the mountains. This airport would serve the Enclave in a staging ground to mass deploy troops to the Commonwealth when the time came. But there was still much build-up still to be done. The Enclave that has come to be known as the White Springs Enclave has created its far reaches from the Blue Ridge Mountains to Ohio, and has been able to deploy more spies to places like Far Harbor, where Brain Richter has been sent to infiltrate the children of Atom and cause issues with the people of Far Harbor. Richter's mission is to cause tensions to rise, so when the time comes to invade a small conflict, will distract United Commonwealth forces in Far Harbor. During this time, McSuckbutt's Enclave nears 5,000 personnel and nearly 4,000 robots produced. But with the plan to reactivate a nuclear reactor, McSuckbutt's ability to produce robots will triple. McSuckbutt will also hire a ruthless mercenary named Hassan that will end up leading the initial invasion force when the time comes. Hassan is a ruthless killer from the pit and has a reputation of brutal tactics. McSuckbutt would also begin to attempt to secure the nuclear silos in the mountains and would begin to retrofit the missiles with more tactical options that would allow for more targeted attacks with less massive damage output. Although that plan would be pushed back to be complete after the restarting of the nuclear power structures in Charleston and Watauga, with the information gathered by McSuckbutt's XWY spies, he would begin to create invasion plans for the Commonwealth. With the options of tactical strikes, McSuckbutt would have to hold off being part of the initial invasion due to system needed to launch. This would make him charge Hassan with the goal of capturing key targets in the opening invasion until McSuckbutt would arrive with his army. The plan would call for 2 other commanders to be selected. He would charge Colonel West with the northern invasion and direct his Children of Atom spy Richter to coordinate the time of Plan North. Plan South would be commanded by Hassan and make up of most of the first wave of invasion. A small detachment force would link with institute remnants in a hidden facility. The need for more to be done in the Blue Ridge Mountains would slow the time of when the invasion would take place, but would give the Enclave more time to prepare and build a strong force in preparation for war. To fix the nuclear power plants, McSuckbutt would seek to convince the Foundation to aid in their restarting, and the use of their people to work the power plants. Little to the Foundation's knowledge, McSuckbutt would order the destruction of the people from Foundation after the power plants would be restarted, leaving the Enclave as the sole rulers of the Appalachian Mountains, and removing any chance of their location from being leaked. Most of the other groups of the Appalachian Mountains had either joined Enclave ranks or been wiped out. The Enclave takeover would be complete after the restarting of the power, and the only thing left was to gain control of the silos. Following elections for the United Commonwealth Alliance, Mayor Bennett from Diamond City is elected and becomes the second UCA president. President Bennett calls for a meeting with his new cabinet and calls for Sentinel Nate to be a part of the meeting. During this meeting, President Bennett calls for a military deployment to retake Quincy that has remained under gunner control this entire time. He also declares after Quincy is retaken, it will fall under the protection of the United Commonwealth Alliance and would become a member. Sentinel Nate would lead the assault on Quincy to attack the gunners who are based there and bring the ex-Minuteman Clint into custody. The Boston Brotherhood chapter brings in multiple vertibirds to help transport United Commonwealth armed forces quickly, but would not send any ground forces due to worries of retaliation by gunner forces. The battle to reclaim Quincy as a settlement would begin with Alliance forces attacking from all sides of the town and striking during a storm, which interfered with gunner transmissions for reinforcements. During this time, other Commonwealth forces prepared for the possible outbreak of a war with the gunners and would be prepared to go on an offensive campaign, seizing gunner positions. President Bennett didn't want a full war with the gunners. but to only retake what was lost, but wanted to be prepared for the war either way. He would order his general Roman Maximus to prepare his forces. The battle to retake Quincy would be the first time the Alliance would engage in combat since its creation during the Institute War. The Commonwealth had always viewed the gunners as a possible threat but never sought to fight with them because of the military structure that they acted in. That was until Mayor Bennett of Diamond City became the president would dislike the group. Unfortunately, the signs of invasion were not seen and would catch the Commonwealth unprepared. The Battle of Quincy would be brutal, as most of the fighting became close quarters, as Nate would lead his forces to capture the church and main building. The gunner leader of Quincy, Clint, would move a group to the bridge, giving the gunners height over the battlefield, causing many casualties on the Alliance side. Nate would order his forces to redirect from their church objective, and for them to stage in the main building and begin targeting gunner forces on the bridge overlooking Quincy. Nate had begun to understand that Clint would not be taken alive, and order his men to no quarter on gunner forces and to wipe them out. All Alliance forces would begin to use the buildings, which would conceal them from gunner fire, but would ultimately cause massive damage to the infrastructure of Quincy and cause most of the town to be in ruins by the end of the fight. Because of the heavy fire coming from the overhead bridge, the air support for the mission would have to withdraw after losing vertibirds and being heavily damaged. The Battle of Quincy would begin to swing towards the Alliance after the fall of Clint and his other officers of his gunner forces. The United Commonwealth Alliance retakes Quincy after a long battle. The gunner commander reaches out to President Bennett and requests to not cause a war and to stop the aggressive actions. The president agrees and halts any more plans that would target gunner positions. Quincy becomes a member and settlement of the United Commonwealth Alliance. During these events, the Enclave spies report the situation and suggest that the gunners could be used as an ally in the war to come. President McSuckbutt agrees and plans to send a large number of gold bullion to pay the gunners to fight in the invasion.
Seems to be in order. Please be on your way.
After the meetings between gunner forces and Enclave forces, the two agree to become allies, as the Enclave will pay the gunners with gold and promises to give them back Quincy after the war. Now that McSuckbutt's Enclave forces have arrived in the Commonwealth, they attack from two directions in the far northeast of the Commonwealth and the southwest near the gunner HQ. The children of Atom and Far Harbor Settlement have had heightened tensions and caused the United Commonwealth to send forces up north to help aid the situation. Removing a UCA general from the Commonwealth, and with another being in Salem, helping to train and ferry forces out of the Commonwealth. The Enclave will launch an attack to cut off and trap forces in Salem. This mission would be led by Colonel West, while Command Major Hassan would lead the campaign in the south to link up with Gunner forces and march into Boston. This would create first contact in the invasion at Somerville Place, where Hassan will order his men to kill all settlers to hide the invasion until the North cuts off Salem's forces. The Gunners would also send men to help silence Somerville Place. The Enclave attack on Somerville would be so swift and devastating it would go unreported to the Commonwealth Alliance, as there would be no survivors. The forces would ensure to chase down any fleeing Commonwealth citizens to hid the invasion until the Southern Invasion Group could link with Gunner Command forces in the south. This brutal tactic was ordered by Hassan and called for the Gunners to cut off any fleeing people and kill them without question.
Here we go.
After hunting down any survivors, Command Major Hassan would reach the Gunner HQ and link up with the Gunner commanders, beginning the main invasion with the Gunners moving east towards Quincy, that they had lost not too long ago, and the Enclave marching north towards the city outskirts. Meanwhile, Colonel West would begin his march towards Salem to attempt to cut off a large portion of the Commonwealth Alliance military.
My good karma's paying off.
With Hassan tearing through the south of the Commonwealth, Colonel West begins his attack on Salem, attempting to cut off General Roman Maximus from his armed forces outside Salem. The assault is aided by Gunner forces that come from Hub City. The Northern Enclave invasion force drives away any incoming vertibirds to keep Salem from being able to escape or reinforce. The United Commonwealth Alliance is caught off guard by this attack and doesn't show any response and doesn't know how to react. With Sentinel Nate being in the capital wasteland due to Brotherhood Civil War issues, only Paladin Brandis is able to help aid the United Commonwealth Armed Forces. With both generals of the UCA forces being unavailable, the command will fall to a Major Whaley who is currently overseeing a training of a new division at the castle. President McSuckbutt has struck the Commonwealth at its weakest point since before the formation of the United Commonwealth Alliance. A secret mission is launched during the initial part of the invasion, as the Enclave forces capture a power station with a secret institute base located underneath. This mission is headed by Colonel McBoomville and a scientist named Ace, who has worked with the institute once before in the creation of synths. This mission is to capture the facility and start to create an army based in the Commonwealth to help aid the invasion, to keep the strain of traveling from the Appalachian Mountains from hindering the invasion. Even though McSuckbutt has the element of surprise, he knows that if the Enclave doesn't gain control of Diamond City and the Boston airport in time before the Brotherhood and Minutemen regain their full strength, then the war will turn into a long, costly blood war. This is why he has sent McBoomville to capture this hidden facility. Hassan also has orders to force march and to capture Diamond City by any means necessary. The invasion plan rests on how fast Hassan can move his forces. Brotherhood forces patrolling Natick have been crushed and leave the west of the Commonwealth almost undefendable, and a clear path to Fort Hegan.
Please proceed to your assigned evacuation point. Thank you for your cooperation.
Colonel West forces begin attacking spread-thin militia groups throughout the northern areas near Salem to ensure that no forces attempt to aid in a breakout of Salem. This move creates a buffer zone for any aid to reach Salem, causing the forces stationed there to go without resupplies, making the encirclement even more brutal. The militia groups in the north don't stand a chance versus the gunner forces aided with Enclave weapons. The gunners out of Hub City help to aid the creation of the buffer zone and help to create an even more rapid advance for Enclave forces in Plan North. Captain Mack of the Slog Northern Militia Corps makes a stand at Lynn Woods with other Boston chapter forces in the area. Hub City gunner forces begin to overwhelm Captain Mack's forces and begin to surround the Alliance forces. While some troops begin to flee, Captain Mack decides to stay and die defending the retreat of others. Captain Mack falls in battle, leading to the collapse of the Slog Northern Militia Force of the Commonwealth Alliance. While the Enclave attacks its targets, the gunners launch a massive assault on Quincy in an attempt to recapture it once again. This is the first battle of the war that will be known to the United Commonwealth Alliance. While this attack is occurring, President Bennett radios the castle and orders a full mobilization. But for the people of Quincy, it will be far too late, as the mayor of Quincy has engaged in battle, holding the line with a small armed group of 15 United Commonwealth soldiers. Mayor Stims calls for his people to take up arms and fight to drive off the gunners. The settlers of Quincy will stand little chance due to the better weapons the gunners have received from the Enclave. This signals the true alliance between the gunners and the White Springs Enclave. The gunner commander orders his forces to kill everyone, much like what happened in Somerville Place, signaling how costly this war will become. The gunner attack on Quincy is led by a fanatic gunner commander by the name of Reginald Hayes. The battle for Quincy would be the revenge the gunners had been waiting for since the Enclave contacted them about reclaiming Quincy. The radio transmissions from Quincy would warn the rest of the Alliance of the coming war. Although, because of the lack of physical Enclave soldiers in the attack on Quincy, the Alliance believed it was an attack by only the gunners and wouldn't know about. Enclave forces, till later survivors of the northern attacks, would reach checkpoints near Boston Airport. Quincy would have fallen by time these events would happen. The start of the war would be marked by the bloody fall of Quincy. McSuckbutt's plan of a surprise invasion would be successful to start and would be aided and supplied by a fleet of Verret bots launching from Wade Airport, airlifting supplies across the wasteland towards the Commonwealth. With the gunners targeting Quincy and the castle, it would free the main southern force to march on the city of Boston and attempt to quickly capture Diamond City and take out President Bennett. The Commonwealth Alliance, having planned for the possible attack from gunner forces, had a plan in place for if an event had occurred. This plan was known as the Mass Pipeline and would withdraw all forces from gunner territories and create a line defense to prepare for a large-scale offensive. Because of the spies placed in the Commonwealth by the Enclave, they know about the planned defensive operation, and Command Major Hassan would attempt a race to break the line outside of Diamond City. With Sentinel Nate being the creator of the plan, it would fall on Major Whaley, as he is the only officer who isn't out of reach to see the operation carried out. Commonwealth forces would begin to retreat from Quincy as the fighting began more brutal, and many would flee towards the Atoms, cats who were beside the town, although because of the worries of a possible attack following Quincy on the Atom Cats garage. Their leader Zeke tells the security forces and local militia to stay and prepare defenses for an upcoming battle. The Atom Cats would abandon Quincy and their calls for help, as Mayor Sims would be pushed back and many civilians from Quincy would be gunned down in the streets of Quincy. While Quincy's attack the north would shortly after begin to report attacks as well. The Commonwealth Alliance would lose Somerville, Quincy Lynn Woods, and the Coastal Cottage Outpost in the first hours of war. The Boston chapter of the Brotherhood of Steal would deploy their fleet of vertibirds, once hearing the news of the Enclave presence in the Commonwealth. The timing of the invasion caught the Commonwealth at its weakest time, with Sentinel Nate being in capital Wasteland, helping to train recruits for the Brotherhood's civil war out west. General Franklin Abernathy overseeing troop deployments in Far Harbor due to the forced rising tensions with Children of Atom groups in the area, and the timely trapped General of Commonwealth Forces in Salem. The Commonwealth is without its top military leadership and would left to quickly adjust with what command structure is remaining for the time. The Enclave coalition would have complete advantage of the Commonwealth for the time. President McSuckbutt would also plan to cripple the Boston chapter with ICBM strikes in the early days of the war, leaving mainly militia groups protecting the Commonwealth. The only thing that could stop the swift victory of the Enclave would be if Major Whaley could create the defensive battle line along the Mass Pike Express Highway on the edge of the city, and for Paladin Brandis to organize a defensive effort to break free the troops trapped in Salem. With the odds against the Commonwealth, a miracle would be needed for them to stall the Blitz attack and give them time to reorganize to counterattack the invasion. Time McSuckbutt did not want to spend in the war. The race to Diamond City would begin following the fall of Quincy. With the fall of the Quincy mayor, Quincy falls back into gunner hands and will become a staging ground for the future march the gunners would make towards South Boston and the castle. The fall of Quincy marks the beginning of the Enclave Commonwealth War.